Well, if you keep your ear very close to what the SCO members have been talking about, lots of different proposals. Some saying come up with a SCO currency.
Yeah.
Some come up with a settlement or payment system suitable for SCO, etc. China has been more cautious. China always wants to do everything, every vetting, every investigation beforehand, exhausting all the possibilities before they take anything very dramatic or drastic, for example. So I think there is a balancing process within SCO because SCO is completely on a consensus basis. But I think the fact that SCO wants to set up this SCO Development Bank is a right step in the right direction. Why? Because once you have a development bank, if you want to do something related to the currency or the payment system or settlement system, it will be much easier. And this will pave the way to future more explorations and experiments about many other things involving the financial restructuring. Well, I would say Prime Minister Modi was warmly welcomed in Tianjin when he attended the SCO summit. It was a great breakthrough in China-Indian relations. I think the way President Trump handled or mishandled India was completely mishandled
Yeah.
or manhandled India was completely a dishonorable thing. He called the Indian economy as a dead economy. No, the Indian economy is not dead. It's very lovely, lively, and it has a great potential. So I think for the United States to reveal its real color, to call India and to deny any respect for India is really one of the worst things I've seen in recent years. Of course, India is a great country, 5,000 years of history. They say 8,000 years of history, and one of them even said 10,000 years of civilization.
Yes.
They would not bow to President Trump or call him uncle, for example, as some of the European leaders now have become accustomed to call President Trump daddy. And I think in the worst day, I was interviewed by a major Indian television, and I said the right thing about what India should do. They should have all the respect and appreciation and admiration, for example, unlike what President Trump is doing to India. I was hailed as a hero in India. Lots of people say, this guy from China is saying the right thing. That was before Prime Minister Modi's decision to go to Tianjin to attend the SCO summit. I would say between China and India, I've called both of them superpopulations, meaning
2.8 billion people.
Exactly. If a country has more than 1 billion people, I will call it a superpopulation. So there are only two superpopulations in the world, India and China. We have tremendous amount of responsibility for our own people, for each other, and for mankind as a whole. So we need to really size up the situation, re-engage with each other, and put the territorial disputes behind us, and really create a momentum where China, India, and all the other members of SCO can work together in great friendship and cooperate to make sure that our future will be brighter and more promising in the future. First of all, purely from my perspective, using the dollar is not a problem. Using the SWIFT system is not a problem. The problem is that if the United States wants to weaponize the dollar, or if they want to weaponize the SWIFT system,
and they have,
that creates a problem. They did this against Russia. They may do this against China. They may do this against India. They may do this against Brazil. Holy cow, this is very dangerous. That means you, by taking this very risky step, destroying your own trustworthiness, destroy your own reliability. That forces other countries, your counterparties, to be creative, to really go to the edge of the envelope and try to come up with something alternative. So I would say, if SCO as a whole try to come up with something other than the dollar, it's not because they want to do that. It's because they were forced by Washington to do that. If they eventually come up with, let's say, a payment system, separate system outside of the SWIFT system, it's because someone weaponized the SWIFT system. Well, let me use the United States as an example. You know, ever since April the 2nd, which President Trump called a liberation day, I really do not know liberation from what. He launched the largest scale tariff war against the rest of the world. But he completely forgets one thing. That is, for the United States to have a dominant dollar and to have the United States suffering a trade deficit. This is both conditional to each other. If you want to have a dominant dollar, then by logic, you need to run into a trade deficit. Now, President Trump wants to reverse it. He wants to have manufacturing done inside the United States.
Yes.
They no longer need to buy all things produced abroad. That means the trade deficit will diminish eventually to be reversed into a surplus. But then the other side of the coin is more important. What about the dominance of the dollar? You need to give up the dominance of the dollar. So I think President Trump has not figured out what he really wants. He wants to have shoemaking manufacturing job back to the United States, toy making back to the United States, or he really wants, as I used to be educated and trained for in the Morgan Stanley style, always see the jugular, always see the prime of the prime. That is the financials, the investment banking, the private equity, and now the stability dollars, for example. So I think President Trump is contradicting himself. He really creates a situation where eventually the dollar dominance may decline and the manufacturing going back to the United States may or may not happen, and the United States will lose out on one front or on both fronts. That's the problem, I would say. Well, if you listen to Elon Musk and believe in what he said, Elon Musk kept saying by the middle of this century, the size of the Chinese economy will be double the size of the United States. So that may or may not happen that early or that sooner, but it's going in that direction.
Sure is.
So I hope the United States will realize to treat China as an enemy is not in the fundamental interests of the American people. The better way is to deal with China, deal with countries like Russia, like India, like Brazil, like South Africa, like all the other SCO members, as they are. Show respect to all these countries. Deal with them as they are, rather than fantasizing about them or completely distort their realities.
Won't it be in the end the investment bankers like yourself, the guys over at Bank of America, BOA, and Morgan Stanley, and all these other places who will have to accept the fact that they need to deal with China and India because their economies are just too big?
Absolutely. I think
that's where it'll happen.
Firms like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs started to move into China market as early as in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And they really profited hugely by engaging with China. And I hope other industries in the United States and Europe will continue to acknowledge this fact, very important fact. Well, I would say when future generations look back at the world of today, they most likely will see this SCO summit as what we now look back at the Cairo conference, Cairo Declaration, or at the Yalta conference, for example, which paved the way for ending the Second World War. Now, for the SCO summit this time, I think several messages come out. We definitely want to maintain the multipolarity as the structure of the world. We will not tolerate any country to claim to be the sole polarity in the world.
Right.
That's number one. Multilateralism should be encouraged rather than being muffled, for example. And then every country, big or small, needed to be treated as an equal. So we will not like the world where rule of the jungle will prevail. You hold a gun at my head, and I will call you uncle, surrender,
Is
for
that
example.
is that how China feels right now?
Well, China will never allow any country to hold a gun at my head without I hold a gun at your head.
Yeah.
So that's the way. Quid pro quo.
Do you think
for
Mr.
China.
Xi feels that way based on the comportment of the U.S. government and Mr. Trump?
No, I think ever since the outbreak of the trade war, the tariff war, people are asking who blinked first. Let me tell you, very honestly, China didn't blink. Who blinked? You know the answer. I do not want to name that great gentleman. I do not want to name that great country, but China didn't blink. China stood very firm, tit for tat. If you want to increase tariff to 145%, China increased the tariff up to 125%, tit for tat.
But this is the common theme here. Think about it, Victor. Russia didn't blink, China didn't blink, and now India didn't blink.
Brazil didn't blink.
And Brazil didn't blink when they said that, we're going to tariff you if you don't end the trial for the former president, which is a completely political
South Africa also didn't blink. South Africa.
Wow.
So all these are founding members or the first batch of members of the SCO organization.
It's the No Blink Society.
No blinks. No blink.
It's amazing, but it really comes to fruition, and it comes to fruition here with all of these no blinkers coming together.
No blinkers, but also they no blink because of the SCO. Give them strength and give them wisdom. Give them the platform to cooperate. And the cooperation is not against the United States. The cooperation is against whatever if the United States is doing the wrong thing.
So you think that Mr. Trump and the United States policies have brought these countries together? Best example of it, I think, is China and India. There's always been a little bit of an antagonism there, not horribly overheated. At times, yes. But now it looks like they're besties all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. But the point I've been telling my Indian friends is that with or without the United States, China and India will have all the incentive to re-engage with each other anyway. And what President Trump did to India, manhandling or abusing India, give greater incentive for both of us to size up each other, to recognize that we are not enemies against each other, and we can be partners going forward. I would say for Europeans, it is a shame that they give up relatively inexpensive piped gas from Russia in lieu of, in exchange for very expensive liquefied natural gas from the United States, because the cost differential will most likely make European advanced manufacturing out of market. Because it will increase their overall cost significantly. So I would appeal on the European countries to use their brain, to use their own judgment to decide.
But pardon me for interrupting, but shouldn't their leaders, what you just said is brilliant. And it seems to make all the sense in the world. If you have a manufacturing base that's way down, which it is, and you want to increase it, make sure that they can get their raw goods at a lower price, so that they can increase the manufacturing. If you increase the price of their raw goods, it's going to be harder for them to make and sell their products.
Exactly. I'm ashamed to see some European leaders say, we no longer want to have Russian gas.
But how could they not, Victor, how could they, when they make this decision to not accept Russian oil, they're punishing their own people.
Exactly. This is exactly the point. They say we no longer need Russian gas, Russian oil. We can use American oil, American gas. But they fail to tell the European people that piped gas, as a matter of fact, is normally only half of the cost of the liquefied natural gas. In many cases, liquefied natural gas is 3 times, if not 4 times, and in some cases, 5 times or 6 times as expensive as piped gas. That's the truth. They fail to tell the European people. They are basically put on such a burden on European economy, European manufacturing for years, if not for decades to come. This is really pushing the European economy into kind of a corner or even into bankruptcy.
And by the way, the hat that you're putting on right now while you're explaining this to us is not the hat of a Chinese communist. It's the hat of an investment banker for Morgan Stanley.
I'm an investment banker. I'm a private equity practitioner. I've done many things. I know how to make money in an honorable and decent way and how to avoid putting cost. I would say without reform, China will be dead. And without democracy, there will be no modernization. So China wants to have democracy. We want to have reform. We want to have one reform after another. We can never be complacent. We can never say, oh, China's door is open wide enough, let's close it. No, it will never happen. You can never say, whatever China has is the best and has reached the pinnacle. No, we will never reach the pinnacle. We will always reform with the hope that China's tomorrow will be better than today, as China's today is better than yesterday. So we want to keep moving forward, keep reforming, keep opening up to the outside world. Well, I would say if we look at the Alaska Summit meeting, President Putin is a big winner. Russia is a big winner. President Trump is also a big winner.
Why?
Ukraine is a big loser. Europe as a whole is a big loser. Why? Let me talk about President Putin and Russia first. I think after suffering all these more than 16,000 sanctions imposed on Russia, Russia didn't collapse. Russia managed to pull through and gained, as you mentioned, a relatively speaking high GDP growth rate and stabilize the situation and single-handedly fighting off not only Ukraine, but all those countries behind Ukraine, which want to use Ukraine as a proxy, try to, for example, bankrupt Russia or to push Russia over through an abyss. No, Russia didn't fall apart. Yeah. That means at the Alaska meeting, Russia and President Putin emerged as the real winners because President Trump showed him the maximum courtesy and the politeness, and they had a private chat, for example, 3-3, etc. And eventually they agreed on many things, actually. Yeah. What has been disclosed probably was only a fraction of what they talked about in private. That means, that leads to my conclusion.
Yes.
There will be no lasting peace in Europe by excluding Russia. And there will be no lasting peace in the world by excluding Russia. Whether you like Russia or not, that's another thing. But you need to deal with Russia as it is. You cannot fantasize about Russia. You cannot come up with conspiracy theories about Russia, etc. When Russia moved into Ukraine, they want to stop Ukraine from becoming a NATO member state. Why should they do that? Let me cite the example of your former country. For example, when the Cuban crisis broke out, the former Soviet Union was a sovereign country.
Yes.
Cuba was a sovereign country. So why should the United States and President Kennedy jump out of the seat crying foul and try to stop the Soviet Union deployment of missiles in Cuba? Because President Kennedy and the United States felt legitimately threatened.
Yes.
If there will be Soviet missiles deployed in Cuba,
yeah.
not in Florida.
Right.
So I think Europeans need to really have second thoughts about what President Trump, President Putin and the Russian government feel about if Ukraine really become a NATO member state. Probably the Russian leaders will feel exactly what President Kennedy
yes.
felt
Yes.
when the Soviet wanted to deploy missiles in Cuba.